What is up, everybody? We are back for another great show on the one and only The Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. As always, Jay York Football alongside me, Mic'd Up Sports One. Man, another 1 p.m. game. These primetime games are past my bedtime, so I'm really excited for this. Just going to do some work around the house this weekend and college football Saturday, NFL Sunday. So really excited for this weekend ahead. And why don't you tell the great people we partnered up with DraftKings this year and tell them how they can put some money in their pocket?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big weekend. Not only you are going to be rested, but the Steelers are going to be rested, obviously coming off a bye week. So hopefully they are able to perform in what is a really big game against a heck of a Commanders team. And who knows, maybe you won some money off the Commanders this year. Big underdogs in a lot of games. Remember, at Bengals, of course, was one of them where they won outright. So hopefully the Steelers bring their A game, and you can bring your A game to DraftKings Sportsbook, whether you call it a touchdown, a tutty, hitting pay dirt, hitting the end zone. Touchdowns, they matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially when you are using our code SICKSPORTS. New customers, you get 200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. It's absolutely incredible. Once again, SICKSPORTS is the code. 200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. You can bet on a touchdown, like we said before. Maybe Mike Williams, newest Steeler receiver, catches a moonball from Russ. Could be an interesting prop. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball.
There you have it. Let's take it to the end zone and get this show started.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Harris Smith shields. Blackout. Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
All right, our guest today is multi-talented. Not only is he a fantasy expert, he's a betting expert, and somehow he finds time to also be the sports editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You can find him on X at Mad with 2 Ds. Journalist, it is none other than Chris Dell. Chris, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Appreciate you having me on.
Stoked to have you, man. Absolutely thrilled. So I mentioned the name in the lead up here, Mike Williams, your newest Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver out here. We know you do a lot of digging in fantasy. This guy obviously probably wasn't rostered on many teams when he was a New York Jet. But does he have any gas in the tank, Chris? What are your thoughts on the Steelers picking up Mike Williams?
I mean, I think it's a great fit for Mike Williams personally. Fantasy-wise, a lot of people have been asking me this past week, does it hurt George Pickens' value? I don't really think it does. When you look at the 2 weeks that Pickens has played with Russell Wilson, in terms of just usage and role, his expected fantasy points per game, he's borderline top 10 right now. And Mike Williams, I think, if anything, could help open things up for Pickens downfield because it gives opposing defenses one viable threat to game plan for opposite George Pickens each week. So I would say in terms of, Williams, you're probably not using him in fantasy unless you're in a super deep league. I don't think he's at the same level of youth and athleticism that we saw years past in LA with Justin Herbert. Having said that, can he be a red zone threat? I definitely think he could. I think in deeper leagues could definitely be worth a speculative add on your bench to kind of see what happens. So I think it's more bullish really for the Steelers in real life than it is for fantasy right now.
Talk to me a little bit about another receiver on the Steelers, probably not rostered in many leagues, but does this also open things up a little bit more for Calvin Austin in the slot? He had a big game, of course, against the Giants. Now that you have 2 receivers on the outside that are going to command attention, do you think he's somebody that can also benefit from this? I guess maybe in real life more so.
Yeah, I definitely think in real life, Calvin Austin, he's limited just because of his size. So I don't know if he's ever going to really earn a ton of targets in this offense consistently. So I could see the case there. You know, he's been running around 70% of his routes in the slot. But I think it comes to a point where it really depends on how much the Steelers are throwing the ball, because you have Freiermuth still. You have a lot of 2 tight end sets that Arthur Smith likes to run. He did that in his days in Tennessee and Atlanta in the past as well. And Darnell Washington's been looking pretty good. I think in Dynasty leagues, he's an interesting guy, super athletic to add to your bench there too. So I don't know if the Steelers' pass rate will ever warrant Austin being like a weekly viable star receiver type of player, but I definitely think he has a role in this offense. And I think in special teams as well, he's proven to be a valuable commodity for the Steelers. So, I mean, you're looking at I would say, you know, an above average receiver crew. If you're talking about Pickens and Williams on the outside, Austin in the slot, Freiermuth and Washington at tight end, you obviously still have Najee and Jalen Warren. And the schedule, looking forward to the rest of the season in the fantasy playoffs at least, things are going to be pretty tough for the Steelers on the ground. So you actually might see some elevated pass rates and production from Russell Wilson and the rest of the pass catchers in fantasy down the stretch too.
Yeah, that was a perfect segue into my first question. What are your thoughts on Russell Wilson? Like, not fantasy value. I actually picked him up because I had Dak Prescott, and that we see how that went. But just talk about, you know, since Russ came, what do you think his ceiling is for the Steelers team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously, I think we forgot what it was like to have a competent pocket passing quarterback in Pittsburgh, right? Like, when's the last time it happened? Because I've been here about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you that a lot of people start getting a bad rap when you have Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph as your quarterback. Yeah. And you know, we kept thinking Pickett because he's a former first round pick, or because he's a former pit star for the Panthers, that like, oh, he's got this upside. He just has to realize it, and it just never happened. And then all of a sudden, you look at Russell Wilson and be like, well, Russell Wilson's not in his prime like he used to be. You know, he's not the let Russ cook from before, but you know what, like, compared to Justin Fields, who, you know, as much as Fields played competently, he even admitted to the media that he didn't play good enough to keep the starting job, at least passing wise. And you've seen the difference. So I think that I set that all up because it's all about like context, right? Like, what did Pittsburgh have before? And frankly, like all these 9 and 8, 8-8 seasons, we're talking about first round playoff exits. It was an aging Ben Roethlisberger who was far past his prime. It was an underwhelming Kenny Pickett. So it's like, oh, wow, like we don't even need an elite quarterback. Like we just need someone who's like borderline average. And if the defense can play above average football, they can fix some things in the run game. Then I think we go from a first round playoff loss Steelers team to like a possible win a couple playoff game Steelers team and see what happens. So I think in that sense, it makes a huge difference from what Russ, I mean, good, look, it's only been 2 games, right? But yeah. I think we've seen so far that at least like the play calling and the personnel fit Russ well with the downfield threats of now Pickens and Mike Williams. And it seems like Tomlin has been making the right decisions there. And kind of, we think of Tomlin as a defensive coach, kind of envisioning the future of the offense. Like it sounds like if it was up to Arthur Smith would have preferred to stay with Fields. And I think that obviously Tomlin made the right call a few weeks ago when he did that. So I think that's really the difference it could make. At least like you can compete for something as opposed to just get in the playoffs and then you're right out.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and Mike will attest to this. I've been standing by Russell Wilson since week 1. I just obviously, again, I think Justin Fields is great. I just don't think he's a franchise quarterback, and I think that the Steelers now can be in a win. You get hot at the right time, you know, make the playoffs and make a run. I mean, it sounds far-fetched, but it's really not too far-fetched when you break it down.
Credit. I flip-flopped. I hated switching to
you got to stick with it.
Yeah, Justin was 3-1, 4-2, and Jordan was like, nope, go to Russ. So I give him credit for that, and he can always pull up the receipts there. I give him credit.
Yeah. So obviously the Steelers have a tough one coming up on Sunday, traveling to Washington to play Jaden Daniels. Just talk about what challenges do you think he'll present for the Steelers defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be definitely a tough test for the Steelers compared to other teams they've played this year. Probably the best offense that they played so far this season. Jaden Daniels, obviously the rushing threat, but he's been a great passer too. And that was like the difference between him and Lamar Jackson coming out of college, is that Lamar was like needed a lot of work as a passer, and Jaden Daniels is coming out right out of the gate. Heisman winner. Like, yeah, he won the Heisman because of the rushing and passing combined, but he was an elite passer. And the scheme has worked well so far for the Commanders there, with Cliff Kingsbury calling things, Terry McLaurin at receiver. It's gonna be tough for the Steelers, man. Like, I think that really Brian Robinson can make a big difference. Like right now, it's iffy whether he's going to play. He was questionable right now. He missed last week. I think he adds an element to the run game that could really give the Steelers some problems. That's been the one weakness of their defense so far this season, is leaking a lot of production on the ground. So I think it's really going to be a test. Like I don't know if you can say, like, what I would think in this game is that if the Steelers come out of this game and it's like win or lose, if it's competitive and they play well, I think that you can be positive and optimistic about it. If they go in there and get trounced by the upstart Commanders, then I think you need to start reassessing things in terms of like, well, how good is this defense really? Because I think that Washington's defense has been playing well. They just traded for Marshawn Lattimore. So it's going to be a stiff test. This is no longer the Commanders' secondary that we just throw the ball all over like we were in the first month of the season. They've been really good the last month. So it's going to be a test for the Steelers on both sides of the ball here. Like, this is a Washington team that can be a true playoff threat in the NFC. Can the Steelers go toe-to-toe with a team like this instead of teams like the Cowboys or the Raiders and things like that? So I'm interested to see how things play out for sure. And the dual threat, really stopping Daniels on the ground, I think will be the big test for the Steelers here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big game, and the schedule doesn't get any easier. We're facing all the juggernauts coming up, but I don't really look. I said this on the last podcast to Mike. Like, I don't really look at the strength of the schedule. Like, I want to play the best team so you can kind of pinpoint where you're at overall, and then obviously AFC North ball starts, and you can throw the records out of the window because every single one of those games are a rivalry. Browns, whatever, but the Browns are the Browns. But before I throw it back to Mike, Daniels and Lamar Jackson, again, I feel like you're a mind reader or something, because you segue into every single one of my questions perfectly. Lamar Jackson, why can't he play the Steelers well? Like, what do the Steelers have on him? It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think really it comes down to scheme for Lamar sometimes. Like, if teams really focus on taking him away, we've seen it when he plays the Chiefs with Spagnuolo. Will this year be the difference, because he's never really had like a true running back threat in the backfield? So that's kind of like, is this the key that unlocks Lamar? But I think the issue with the Ravens this year in terms of making a playoff run would be their defense. Like, this might be the worst defense Lamar has had when he's been in Baltimore too. So you kind of got to take one side or the other there. But yeah, I mean, with Lamar, I think when you're talking about these division battles that get really close, the Steelers have really good linebacking play. And those are the guys that can spy on a guy like Lamar and be like, hey, look, like, we're going to force you to beat us through the air. So I think in the past, that's what's really gotten Lamar when it comes to games against Kansas City, against Pittsburgh. I think similar struggles there. But again, like, the X factor now is like, can the Steelers sell out to stop Lamar when you've got Derrick Henry in the backfield as we get into these winter months? And that's going to be the real differentiator between past years Steelers-Ravens games and 2024 Steelers-Ravens games.
Yeah. Mike?
Chris, you're a big draft guy as well, right?
I am. I am a big draft guy.
So I want to talk a little bit of Roman Wilson with you. How high were you on him coming out, first and foremost? And what do you make of his season so far? Lack thereof.
Right. Yeah. He hasn't even had a season so far. Right. Yeah. I mean, like, I think that it's tough with Roman Wilson. Like, he's kind of we wanted him to do what Calvin Austin's kind of grown into this role as a slot guy so far this year. And that's where Roman Wilson really excelled. I thought he was more like kind of similar to where he went, like a third round talent, which is good for a receiver coming out in the draft. You look at his size, like decent, 5'11", 185. The most important thing that sticks out when you look at his measurables here from the combine, he was 95th percentile in the 40-yard dash. So you have like a little bit bigger size than Calvin Austin, a little bit more speed. I think that in the right scheme with the Russell Wilson, like he could be a contributor down the road. Like I do rest of season fantasy rankings every week, and like for the last month, like I'll rank 250 players. Like, and basically when you get down to like wide receiver 80, it starts to get really thin. I start to look at like what are the rookies that like haven't done anything in the box score yet this year, but like in an ideal world, like they could have some late season value. And I was kind of putting Roman Wilson in that range. Like if he gets healthy, if he gets playing time, if Russell Wilson remains a quarterback, like we could see in a perfect world something actually happen here. I think it gets things a little murky now, even when he does come back, because we have seen Austin playing better. I think maybe like at this point, a best case short-term scenario would be like somewhat splitting slot snaps with Wilson and Austin. But I see him more of like a bigger slot receiver who could get a lot of targets and really win with yards after the catch, kind of like we saw with Rashee Rice in Kansas City. Obviously not the same size, but that's kind of how I see like the upside of Roman Wilson over the next, this season and going into next season too.
Hey, now I took a peek at those rankings. I saw a guy that I want to ask you about as well, who seems to be on the elevator going up, and that's Jaylen Warren.
Well, I've been hoping for it all year, man. Like it hasn't happened. And Najee's playing good enough. Like this is actually like Najee's playing better than he did last year, right? Like he's holding back Warren from really being a fantasy contributor. I have my waiver wire rankings, and like they'll list guys that are less than 50% owned or on that borderline in like various Yahoo, ESPN league averages and stuff. And I always put Warren near the top because Warren, like, he was out of the lineup. He was in the lineup. He was never fully healthy. I think he's just getting to the point now where he's been healthy for a couple games. He's looked better the last few weeks. He's playing half the game. He's playing 50% of the snaps, but when you look at the running back touches, it's heavily skewed towards Najee Harris. So I think that it's going to be tough for Warren, but again, like it's contingent upside for him. Like if anything ever happened to Najee Harris, like we could see Warren become the focal point of this offense. I'm not too concerned about Cordero Patterson possibly coming back this week. I'm very concerned with him staying healthy. Like we've seen him, he looked good. He looks good on the handful of touches he gets, but even dating back to the last few seasons in Atlanta, he's older now. He just cannot stay healthy. So I don't know if that concerns me too much. I think if Patterson was healthy, he will take some touches away from both those other guys, just enough to make it annoying, right? So I think with Warren, like last year, he was more of a standalone, hey, I can throw this guy in my flex. This year, it's like I'm kind of waiting for that still. So I still believe the talent is there, but Najee on the last year of his contract, you might as well drive the car until the wheels fall off with him, especially if you're not going to pay him. So I'm a little more like my ceiling and optimism is a little more capped on Warren right now than it has been in years past. But I'm still hopeful for some opportunity as we get later on in the season.
Yeah, probably more of a stash. Najee gets dinged, and Warren, I would imagine, becomes a top 10 to 15 play if Najee were to miss a game. Although Najee's been one of the most durable players, not just running back.
That's the problem.
Yeah, in the league since he came into the league. Hey, dude, this has been a pleasure. Tell everybody where they could find you, what you got going on, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned it. You got the name right, the Mad Journalist with 2 Ds. I always say it that way myself on my podcast too, so appreciate that. Yeah, you can catch my obviously you can catch all of our work at the Post-Gazette. It's post-gazette.com. We have Steelers insiders, Brian Batko, Ray Fittipaldo, Jerry Dulac. We've got our columnists, Paul Zeiss, Joe Starkey, Jason Mackey, doing a lot of great content there every day and every week for every Steelers game. We cover every Steelers game like it's the Super Bowl, so make sure to check out post-gazette.com. In terms of my fantasy work, I do at the Post-Gazette, I do write a Sunday morning strategy column. It's my fantasy favorites manifesto column. I talk about top running back stashes, top streamers, top stashes for future weeks and defenses. I post my rankings there, so you can catch that every Sunday morning with my rankings in the actual newspaper. Yeah, we still actually do print a newspaper on Sundays, if you can believe that. And you can catch the full article on the website at post-gazette.com. Catch the rest on my Twitter, where I post rest of season rankings, waiver wire rankings, my weekly rankings. I just posted my usage and utilization thread where I talk about my top data takeaways on all 32 teams, and I post that every single week as well. So you can catch that all on my Twitter as well.
Awesome. Hey, I think we should bring newspapers back. That just there's nothing like eating and just looking through the sports section. I love having a physical copy. I really do.
Sunday morning. It's awesome.
Well, it's all about the newspaper's all about the vibes these days, man. Bring back the newspaper vibes for sure.
You know every Steelers
just like bell bottoms.
You
yeah,
know.
Well, there you go.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks, guys.
It's been a pleasure.
Hey, do you want before we jump off, predict this score, predict this game? What do you got?
Yeah, I'm riding high with the Steelers right now, and they could go here and get beat. I think it's going to be a close game, but I have the Steelers 23-17. I think Russell Wilson just continues, just a lot of good energy coming in. You got Mike Williams. We're going to see. This is when you really start to see who has a shot to go to the big dance, I guess you call it. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I almost feel overconfident, which is rare.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, but yeah I'm kind of like right in the middle. I would say I'm like at a 60-40. I would say leaning more towards 60.
They're good. They beat some solid.
They're exciting.
But the Steelers are getting healthier. Sutton's back. Sounds like Herbig might be back. Patterson's back. Frazier might be playing. Don't quote me on those. We're still a couple of days away. Coming off a bye, playing really well generally against rookie quarterbacks, except C.J. Stroud last year. And you mentioned the Lamar thing. I do think they're very similar players, and the Steelers have always found a way to shut down Lamar. So I'm going to go 26-14 Steelers. Strange score, but we'll go 4 field goals by Boz and 2 touchdowns.
There you go. Team MVP, Chris Boswell.
There it is.
Matter. Hey, make sure you go back and watch our previous episodes. We're just going to keep cranking out the guests. We have players on throughout the season as well. And we do this for you. So make sure you tell your friends to subscribe. It costs nothing. Make some money. Use our code 6sports DraftKings. And man, I'll end on this. And I'm trying to manifest it. And, I'll eat it. 7-2. How could you complain? We might have to get a sick T-shirt printed. What do you think?
Any questions?
All right, guys. Thank you. J York Football, Mic'd Up Sports 1. Until next time, go Steelers.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.